Who got 9 or better? Raise your hand. 9 or better. Who got 3 or more kimono dragons? Anyone get an extra penguin? Anyone? Oh, wow, you guys are top graders. 2 paddles. 2 paddles. Hand them up. Turn them up, turn them up. Chop, chop, people. We're burning daylight. Look, it's I don't see the sun now. It's just burning all the daylight. Unearned metal planking. Let's go. All right. This is coming out of your paycheck. I know, but you're going to be like 60 years old and your paycheck is going to be garbage. Oh, with a couple of notes. I'm always behind. Right there. One of these days, One of these days. I already have. All right. One thing really quick. Got to finish the last couple bits of notes and we'll get to the video. I'm sorry I'm behind. So, did he say anything about it?
Yeah, he did.
Oh, yeah.
What did he say?
I couldn't listen to the full message yet, but he said something.
Yeah,
We were like mid conversation.
when you talk to him, I mean, I bet it's got to be brilliant.
Yeah, no, he was just
Doesn't matter.
He just sent me some voice messages just yesterday.
He's been in Berlin for like, what, 5 or 6 years?
No, since like 2015.
It's been that long?
Since second grade.
Who had?
Oh yeah, because you became internationally known.
That video, yeah.
Yeah, from Unis, was it UNICEF?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We have to find that and show everybody.
Nah, that's so embarrassing.
Come on, see you as a second grader.
That's the most embarrassing.
You owe me now.
It was like, second grade.
Hey, when you find out from it, though, let's talk about it class. Maybe we think something special. That'd be cool. Like Tuesday or Wednesday special topics. I really want to know what he says. We'll figure it out. But I bet he is. For him, he's been, but for his family.
He's not serious.
Hey, he lived, what was he? He lived there. Where was he before that?
I don't even like I've never wake up.
But he's ethnically Palestinian, and like he just grew up there. I don't know.
Wow. Yeah, wow. Yeah. What's that? Oh, I know. One year, a bunch of students stuck in my class and put Calhoun all over mine. There's still a couple pictures left. That was years ago. I've left a few up. This is still up. Someone gave me a calendar of cats on top of things, and they covered my whole room. They took it when the year was done and covered my whole room with cats on top of it. This is one's left. Huh? It's too terrifying for us. It's far too terrifying. All right, here we go. Direct conference and Sam. Let's do this really quick. So I got to get to this court case. We got right to here, didn't we?
Yeah.
And we got Roger Taney. And Taney decided the whole problem is sectionalism. One big problem. He would solve it with one decision. If you get rid of the sectional divide over slavery, no civil war. So they ruled these things, first off, and they were very clear about it. Blacks, and it was very open to what was black. Remember, whole issue about what slavery actually was, who parents were, but they're not citizens. They should have thrown the court case out, but this is what we call an obiter dictum decision. He kept ruling. very much like this current Supreme Court. Slaves are property and can be brought anywhere. Property is protected by the Constitution. So it doesn't matter if they have slave codes or not. If they went into Kentucky or Illinois, they're property. And lastly, that means the Missouri Compromise, the MoComp, and the Northwest Ordinance way back in 1787, unconstitutional. So it opened up most of the North technically to slavery, even though they don't have slave codes. Not states who came in with at the Revolutionary War. They had their own constitution, so that doesn't count. But everybody else. So I thought, no sectional divide, no problem here. Taney thought in this 62 ruling, all problems will be solved. All problems. Northerners have been saying, Free Soilers and abolitionists have been saying there's been a conspiracy by the South to spread slavery everywhere. And this decision came up and they said, we knew it. And in fact, this should remind you a little bit of the Tea Party. They said, told you so. This is part of the conspiracy. We have to fight back. And don't forget, this is after Potawatomi. John Brown has taught people to fight back. As awful as it was. And then Southerners looked and said, they're not even going to obey the law. States' rights, remember? Told you so. This decision would polarize people even more. Even more. And it's one of those kind of prophecies that, self-fulfilling prophecy. And eventually, abolitionists would buy them their freedom, but Dred Scott would be considered one of the worst rulings in history. We'll get to another one right after Christmas break called Plessy versus Ferguson. And then a panic hit. There are factory closures, cotton prices dropped. Another economic downturn. And this is a picture of the panic when prices begin to drop. We appear to be nearing financial bubble right now. So we could be coming to a panic right now, hey. But this is supposed to be all the people complain about paper dropping its value. So here's one of the carriages, and that's the rider. That's supposed to be its whip. But I always see that, and I think he looks like he's fishing for the silk hats. Got one. And 1858, the Lincoln-Douglas debate. So Abraham Lincoln, now a Republican, still relatively unknown, decided to run against Stephen Douglas for the Illinois Senate. And the whole big issue is Dred Scott. But don't forget, state assemblies chose senators. So this is all about getting Democrats or the brand new Republicans elected to Congress. And they did a series of debates throughout the state. 7 debates where they could ask each other questions, give long speeches, nothing like debates today, which are horrific. And I know that's my judgment, but if you watch the debates, you know how bad they are. And this is where Lincoln would make his very famous statement about the divide over slavery. A house divided against itself cannot stand. Basically, we cannot be one side free and one side slave. A reckoning is going to have to come, and Dred Scott did not bring things together. But this would be devastating to Douglas. In Freeport, which Illinois was really kind of more pro-slavery or more hostility to abolitionists, more open to it in the North. In Freeport, Stephen Douglas was trying to straddle the fence. He knew a lot of Northerners hated Dred Scott, but Southerners are watching. And he's got to come out for it if he wants to be president. So he would make a statement called the Freeport Doctrine. I like that picture of Douglas. Where he said states and territories, they have to abide by Dred Scott, but they don't have to pass slave codes. So therefore they can avoid slaves. Just don't pass the slave codes. Fine. So Dred Scott's still the law, but no one is going to bring their slaves up to Wisconsin if they don't have slave codes. He thought this is telling the North, you don't have to have slavery, but telling the South he still defends slave codes, or still defends Dred Scott. He made everybody mad. Everybody got mad because of this. And he would not recover politically. This was kind of a big deal. It's one of those, you know, when you try to please everybody, you please nobody. Terrible move, the Freeport Doctrine. Well then, the next year, John Brown had left Kansas, but he's back. I like that picture of John Brown, his hand shaking a little bit because of the long exposure time. And in 1859, John Brown's raid, or the Harper's Ferry raid. Brown went up to the burnt over district of New York, and he, so tired of the bullying, so tired that the federal government was worthless in this, as he saw it, a bunch of dough faces, and the South could get whatever they want. He decided it's time to end slavery now, and that requires action, bravery, courage. So he actually thought about starting a slave rebellion. Harper's Ferry is in the mountains of Northern Virginia. Now it's West Virginia. And the thought was they would they would go to an armory there where they made Harper's Ferry muskets. Get the muskets, but they also brought 14-foot long pikes. That's kind of what they look like. And they would go south to where the plantations are in Virginia, free enslaved people, start a rebellion using the Appalachian Mountains as a base. Now, he was quite popular amongst abolitionists in the North. In fact, he was close friends with Frederick Douglass, who admired his courage, admired his bravery, which Douglass said, I don't have that kind of courage to do what I know is right. And I think that's wrong. Douglass did, but they thought this was too far. So, but a few did finance this. A few of the abolitionists, Douglass was not one of them. But he went south and he lost his nerve. Nobody knows exactly what happened. They entered the town, things began to fall apart. They entered at night, in the panic, they saw a man crossing the railroad bridge over the Shenandoah River, and Brown's men shot and killed him, and killed just a worker there who, irony of ironies, was a freed former enslaved person. And so it just all went bad. Now, probably 30, some estimates as high as 50 slaves in the area joined and tried to help, but there weren't many plantations there. They had to move south to where the plantations were. And he hesitated. And in that process, they allowed themselves to get bogged down in the firehouse right here, and then he was surrounded. Militia, remember there's a militia surrounded him, and Brown, I don't know, Brown's, maybe he probably didn't really want a rebellion, but cavalry, Marines arrived from Washington, D.C. under the command of Robert E. Lee. They surrounded the firehouse, and after a sharp firefight, they stormed it using a ladder as a battering ram and killed or captured all of the rebels. A couple, not all, almost all. A couple escaped. John Brown was severely wounded but captured alive. Bleeding but alive. This would be huge. He had his trial, and he turned the trial against an indictment of slavery, where he kind of watered down the slave rebellion part, but of course he was going to be condemned. His last words, which he would give to a reporter, were this: that's the trial on top. What's he talking about here? He knows Civil War is coming. He's being a little bit of a hypocrite, though, isn't he? He wanted to start a slave rebellion. That's a lot of bloodshed. But still, he gave that. And he will be one of the most divisive, most polarizing characters in American history. At his execution, there's going to be militia from all over the state. In a militia unit, remember, there's militia units in the South. The Richmond Grays from Richmond, Virginia. One of the soldiers there in that militia was also an up-and-coming actor. His name was, and he witnessed this execution, his name was John Wilkes Booth. Have you heard of John Wilkes Booth? What did he do 6 years later? Yeah, murdered President Lincoln.
he was at the execution of John Brown. John Brown, the reaction, wow. John Brown. Yeah, Potawatomi, you could argue that that's slavery. It's over. It's going to be a horrific war. John Brown was one of these figures, a hinge figure in American and therefore world history. First off, to the South, they said the positive good theory, that Southern ideology was correct. There wasn't a rebellion, therefore the slaves liked slavery. But this is misleading. There just weren't many slaves there, and a lot did join and died with John Brown for freedom. Also, this convinced him that all, not just abolitionists, but free soilers were John Brown. Gee, I wonder if there'll be a free soil president in a little bit. And they strengthened the slave codes. In the North, there was some outright opposition, but they were split. And you got a lot of this. I don't approve of John Brown's methods, but a lot of that, which I get. And a term that really wasn't around yet. He was a terrorist. But one man's terrorist could be somebody else's freedom fighter. It depends on what side you're on. Remember, if they would have had the word, the British would have called the founding fathers of the United States terrorists. And by all definition, the Tea Party, they were. But one man's terrorist is another freedom fighter. Life is complex. And also, John Brown's body would become the marching song for hundreds of thousands of Union soldiers that fight for the United States, and soon freedom. And many thought equality. And to the North, it seemed to confirm their ideology that the brutal system in the South cannot go west. So John Brown's body lies a moldering in the grave. Have you ever heard the Battle Cry of Freedom? I'm sorry, the Battle Hymn of the Republic? The most famous hymn out of the Civil War would take the music of John Brown's body. John Brown's body lies a moldering in the grave. You can march to it. And that would become the marching song. John Brown represented the North. There would be, after the Civil War, there's going to be a movement to make John Brown into a lunatic, a murderous killer. And he wasn't. In his tactics, if you're right or wrong, but he was a tireless fighter for equality and freedom. My history teacher, whom I still always will say good things about, Mr. Lepke, I'll never forget him, when I was a junior in high school, told our class that John Brown was a murderous lunatic who just killed randomly. He was not. So, 1860, the election. The Democrats are going to split over slavery. They had their convention in Baltimore. Stephen Douglas was going to be the nominee for popular sovereignty, but Southerners walked out. And with the when the Democrats split, all the Republicans have to do is not screw up. This is the reason Lincoln won. The Democrats were bigger, but they're split. Southern Democrats met in Charleston, South Carolina. A quick ad hoc convention, and they nominated this man. His name is, of course, John C. Oh, we went the wrong way. Breckinridge. John Charles Breckinridge. States' rights, which is pro-slavery. You recognize that uniform? That is a Confederate uniform. He would, of course, betray his country and become a Confederate. A third party jumped up, I guess a fourth party jumped in. And these are kind of Democrats and old Whigs called the Constitutional Union Party. And they nominated, I swear to you, I am not making this up, John C. Bell. And their whole platform was the Constitution. What does the Constitution mean? I don't know. It clearly didn't work to stop civil war. So all the Republicans have to do is pick somebody who's not controversial. What do you call a candidate who's kind of unknown? A dark horse, and that dark horse would be Abraham Lincoln. He would grow his beard after the election, and yes, it's true, when a 13-year-old girl sent him a note saying he should grow a beard, he looked back. And that's how come he grew a beard.
Yeah,
Now the letters I've seen the letter in the museum at, ironically, Ford's Field. Don't worry about Hannibal Hamlin. The platform, free soil, federal support for a railroad, a Homestead Act providing 160 acres in land in the West, which is not near enough. And they're going to steal it from somebody, obviously. A protecting tariff, and something like workers' rights. The Republican Party of 1860s, not the Republican Party of 1880, which is purely pro-business. You didn't quite get to what time is it over? Oh shoot, let me finish this then. Okay, we'll start the video tomorrow. I know, forgive me. But they all passed because the South left the Union. The South left the Union. Don't you like that picture of Lincoln? Isn't that a good picture? I always like that one. Okay, let's get this. Don't gotta get to one. Lincoln, the big deal about Lincoln is they would really push. He started with nothing, and he split rails or rode a keel boat. Here is splitting the Democratic rail, but he hated to be called Abe. He hated Abe. He despised. Now you got to get who wins the elections. We're not quite done. One more thing to write. By the way, what's that thing? What is that horrifying character right there? That looks like a doll, doesn't it? But let's get right here. Here is the Democrats split, and therefore Lincoln in the rail. This is my favorite one. And it says, here's Lincoln racing Douglas. And it says, how I get over this fence to the Capitol. You'll find me in this here fence, Master Douglas. What does this represent? Slavery. And here's, I can do it for I had built it. What's he carrying right here? It's supposed to be an axe, but doesn't it look like a ham on a stick? Let's get this down. The election would go to Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln would win and got less than 40% of the popular vote. He wasn't on the ballot in any state that seceded from the Union. Now, some of you put this away, you got to get this, so you make sure you get this. You got 40% of the vote. He was not on the ballot in any state. In fact, the clear majority of people wanted somebody else. But let's be very clear about this. Oh, it also very much shows the sectional divide, doesn't it? I mean, there's no doubt where the sectional divide is. And look how many votes Douglas got, but only 12 electoral votes. Remember, we have that system. You have to win states. Lastly, he's a free soiler, and to Southerners, a free soiler is John Brown. Within a month of the election, I'm sorry, a little bit over a month of the election, what state will be the first to secede? Yeah. You remember what state would be second? The second most highest percentage of slaves? Mississippi. So tomorrow we pick up the video, have that worksheet ready after we talk a little bit about the DBQ. If you were gone on Friday, you need to pick up this for a DBQ. If you're gone on Friday. If you're gone, someone else leave. Clear out. Nice grab. You want to play a video? You hey, it's a really good video. And you're so cute. Do you need this? Awesome. All right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not the.
The DBQ number.
Okay. We have a test, like but not on Friday?
Not on Friday.
Okay. And then
So, this is probably missing something, but in the book, it always says, like, the 19th century, we're referring to the,
Yeah.
is that on purpose?
19th century. So the first century is not.
So,
Does it make sense? The first century was no, and then.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you think about it, oh, of course, yeah.
That's
that's really what we see when
I'm going to talk about it. We're doing the DBQ up.
Okay, is that just the outline or is there anything?
I'm gonna give you the, I'm gonna give you everything on Thursday.
Finally goes up for Mike.
Oh, you need one, yeah. And so just go over and I'll talk a little bit more about DBQ. We're doing it on Thursday in class. I'll give you everything on. I'm with you. Yeah, one.
Yes.
We can, oh, let's do it. We should just do it on Thursday. Good.
You got that.
Goodbye. I'm good. You don't have a degree. You can't. Oh my goodness. See, it's because you don't have a degree. Look what happened. Zane hurt himself. Oh, looking aerodynamic on haircut.
Yeah.
All right, everyone, give me a second. I'll.
Presenting. I won't.